gentlemen, my name is Sylvester Chwanuka. With me are my colleagues, Kaboyo Priscilla, Abigail, Jennifer, and Mercy, who is capturing this video. Today we are going to look at our topic of discussion, which is incentivizing USP is key to attracting and scaling up PPPs in developing authorities. This is how we are going to move. We are going to look at the background, definition of terms, motivation for use of unsolicited proposals, merits of using USPs to government, demerits of using USPs to government, the USP process, guidelines for USP implementation, conclusion, and then we shall have the references from where this material has come from. Globally, private sector participation in infrastructure has proven to be a significant instrument for delivery of infrastructure investment in both emerging and mature markets. Private sector participation in infrastructure is most often contracted through regulated and competitive solicited procurement processes, called them PPP processes. An alternative to this is the use of unsolicited proposals. During the last couple of years, the adoption of unsolicited proposals for public-private partnership implementation has risen significantly. There has been a clear global trend of adopting new legal frameworks for PPP projects with provision for dealing with unsolicited proposals in a more transparent and competitive manner. Some countries facilitate USPs using the generally applicable procurement and PP regulations. Private investment significantly contributes to the implementation of public infrastructure, and USPs have become part of the policy mix. Uganda has had a range of projects under the PPP model. Most of the projects that take up of the PPP model were negotiated and concluded under different legal regimes, not necessarily the PPP Act, which has only been in existence since 2015. Prior to this, there were procurements that were being done. But these were being done in accordance to the Public Enterprise Reform and the Divestiture Act 1993, the PPPDA Act 2003, and the PPP Framework Policy of 2010. Essentially, because of the controversial nature of the unsolicited proposals, some advanced jurisdictions, including the United Kingdom and Hong Kong, do not entertain this method of PPP project implementation. Let us look at why move PPP, or the motivation for use of unsolicited proposals. The inability of government agencies to identify, prioritize, and procure. 2, there is rapid delivery of projects that come under USPs. There's lack of private investors' interest in projects at remote areas is another motivator. The avoidance of lengthy competitive bidding processes is another point to take note of. Unsolicited proposals are relied on more for energy, water, and sewage projects than for transportation projects. The latter representing 14% of projects in private participation in infrastructure. In Asia, including China, USPs appear to be a more significant part of a policy mix than in the rest of the world. Low-income countries have more number of PPPs that reach financial close initiated through USPs, whereas upper middle income countries had a greater number of projects with larger absolute contract value originating from USPs. What are the advantages of using USPs? You are able to generate new and innovative infrastructure proposals that come in from the private sector. Governments, they make governments open for business and jobs, okay? There is harnessing the creativity and innovation of the private sector. You realize that if government has not gone to the private sector, this creativity and innovation could not be coming to government without use of USPs. They create a clear and fair process for receiving and evaluating proposals. Implementing a USP will be easier and faster than implementing a publicly initiated PP project. USPs are more likely to provide access to finance than publicly initiated projects. You're all aware that the debt to GDP ratio has been increasing over a period of time, and government as such cannot finance the public service and the goods. So they need to use USPs. Let us look at the disadvantages. There's lack of transparency in selection and implementation of projects. For instance, if I came up with a proposal and I have people who are in the government and I have already gone through or had their input, it will be much easier for me to get this contract without necessarily going through an open competitive process. Number two is related to number one. There's avoidance of competition. People who always use USPs try to avoid the competition if they're subjected to the traditional way of procurement. Opportunities for corruption and political patronage are prevalent in USPs. For instance, people can always buy their way to have substandard products to get into the field. And if I do not support the sitting in government or organization, political organization, that means however much my proposal is good, it might not go through. Acceptance of poor quality projects. This is related to corruption. When you have a corrupt system, this will find their way on the table. USPs do not allow public agencies to overcome technical financial capacity constraints. We are saying if government cannot have the capacity and the capacity is outside in the private sector, how then can government be a check on the substandard, on the technical and the financial capacity constraints? Most USPs are not real innovation. You find that they are a duplicate of what already the government has in place, and we wouldn't want to waste government's money on already projects that are being handled elsewhere or captured in government. Thank you so much. I beg to stop here and call my...
Hi, Abigail Jennifer Nakari, registration number 18, MBA, Kampala Weekend, 0038. I'll take you through the USP process. The first stage is submission. The public agency receives a USP from a USP proponent. Our articulated submission framework helps ensure that the USP meets the government's requirements and is processed efficiently. It also provides guidance to USP proponents in developing quality proposals that comply with the public agency's requirements. In that case, the requirements being the economic requirements and the public service interest. 2. Evaluation process. The public agency evaluates the USP and determines whether or not to study it in greater detail. Our articulated USP evaluation process ensures that only projects that meet public objectives and basic feasibility criteria are considered for the third stage. Stage 3 is the development stage. The public agency determines whether the proposed project is feasible, whether it is expected to generate value for money through PPP delivery, and how it should be structured to maximize value for money. The feasibility studies undertaken during this stage are significantly more detailed than the preliminary feasibility studies developed by the USP proponent as part of the USP submission. At the end of this stage, the public agency reassesses the project against the same evaluation criteria used during the evaluation stage. For the project development, we have to consider the private parties' financial base. For example, the case of Australia, where we have to make sure that the private party at least has $3 million if they are to take on the infrastructure project, and then they have to have a minimum of $1 million if they are to take on a non-infrastructure development project. The fourth stage is the procurement stage. During this stage, the public agency prepares and undertakes procurement. An effective procurement process ensures that the PPP contract represents a fair market price and protects the public interest. including a thorough, sustainable, and robust risk allocation. That is, at the procurement stage, the public party has to look at the deal that the private party is bringing, and then has to subject it to competition, I should say, competition, to see if they can get a better deal in relation to public finance available, or if that deal can be directly negotiated. That's if no better deal is raised. And in terms of risk allocation, how is the private party going to take on the project? Are they going to do the design of the project? Are they going to accept to take on the design, the construction, the building, and the maintenance, operation and maintenance of the project? So that's it for the USP project.
Nampi Mamasi, registration number 18, MBA Kampala Weekend 0016. I'm here to present the guidelines for handling of the USPs. A USP project must align with national infrastructure priorities and meet a real societal and economic need. When a project concept originates from the private sector, the public agency must ensure that the proposed project satisfies public interest criteria. If a public agency believes that there are other project solutions that may be better to address the societal need, it should either reject the unsolicited proposal or propose amendments to align it with public needs. In Virginia, in the US, there is a screening process known as policy review, and it comprises 8 elements that include the need to meet transportation goals, plans, and public needs. In mature markets like Italy, Australia, Chile, and Peru, which accept USPs outside of the government's pipeline of projects, they require that the USPs be consistent with the government's plans. The other guidelines is that the USPs should have value for money. Governments should only structure USP projects as PPPs if they are expected to generate greater value for money under PPP delivery than under conventional delivery, which is the traditional procurement process. In Virginia and New South Wales, USP projects must demonstrate value for money. Although it's in Virginia, it's not listed as a requirement. The USP should have value for money. Governments should only structure USP projects as PPPs if they are expected to generate greater value for money under PPP delivery than under conventional delivery, which includes the traditional procurement processes. In Virginia and South Wales, there is emphasis on the need for USP projects to demonstrate value for money. In 2013, the Virginia Port Authority rejected a USP based on the value for money analysis. The third one is that there should be protection of private sector interests. The absence of a well-developed USP framework is extremely likely to elicit opportunistic behavior from private firms. The USPs may attract private sector interests that are not conducive to creating value for money and building a long-term partnership, which is one of the key attributes of PPP projects. In the Philippines, the USP proponent had several options to pursue a concession of the connector road. However, the USP proponent preferred a well-regulated, unsolicited approach to the contractual option because it provided a sound legal basis for awarding a concession, even though it would involve eventual exposure to competition in the form of a Swiss challenge. So in that way, his interests were, that company's interests were protected. There should be some form of reward or reimbursement of project development costs and payment for intellectual property rights. In the absence of a clear competitive advantage or direct contracting reasonable compensation, it seems necessary to convince potential proponents to come up with USPs. This has been observed in countries with neither reimbursement of development costs or any meaningful protection of IP rights related to USPs. When the private party comes and presents their proposal to government or to a public agency, they expect to be compensated in some form of way. So if the government cannot afford to provide compensation, the bidder to which the project is awarded can include the compensation as part of their costs and increase the revenue requirements. In addition, the public sector should have the capacity to manage the USPs. Countries such as Kenya and Tanzania and Senegal, which are developing countries, typically rely on unsolicited proposals to develop projects. In return, they expect that these projects will be awarded to them. But this is sometimes not the case, and therefore the public sector, to guard against this manipulation by the person that brought the project, they should have the capacity to manage these unsolicited proposals. The other guideline is that there should be effective public sector coordination. Implementation of USPs is often hindered by both inter and intra-public sector coordination and communication issues. In Colombia, which allows unsolicited proposals to be submitted to any public or public entity, public officials indicate that USPs are frequently submitted to the wrong department or they are duplicated across many departments, and this drains public resources. The lack of capacity to effectively review and evaluate USPs was also cited as a concern in Colombia and Italy at municipal levels. Public officials are often distracted from their usual government employment because they have to prioritize USPs in favor of publicly initiated priority projects. The other guideline is that there should be establishment of a dedicated time window for USP submissions to prevent public officials from being distracted from their priorities and creates certainty for USP proponents. I've covered that in the previous slide. I'll move on to the next. USPs should create sufficient market interest. Public agencies must offer sufficient time for competing bidders to develop their bids. In Colombia, competing bidders have from 1 to 6 months to express interest in a project, with 2 months being the most frequent time period. Experience shows that a shortage of preparation time strongly deters private entities from submitting competing bids. The other guideline is that there should be an establishment of a USP enabling environment. This environment includes setting up, like having institutional capacity, policies, and legal frameworks to guide the USP process. Such frameworks are developed to promote transparency and introduce competition, and thereby increase and the chances of getting good value for money from these projects. In Chile and Peru, the central unit, which is the Ministry of Public Works, is the one that handles the USP process. In Jamaica, it is the privatization and PPP unit. The other guideline is that there should be established requirements in regard to private sector capacity. Many unsolicited proposals are opportunistic and of poor quality, and to guard against this, governments put in place sophisticated set of minimum requirements. In South Africa and in Virginia, they established minimum submission requirements which the USP proponent must adhere to. Public officials in these various jurisdictions have agreed that stringent minimum requirements are effective at reducing the number of low-quality USPs. In Colombia and Chile, there is a requirement that USPs pass through 2 stages, with more stringent submission requirements at the second stage, and this has increased the quality of USP proposals. the other guideline is that there should be affordability of USPs. Before governments admit these USPs, they should understand their impact on public finance, whether there are any fiscal liabilities, whether the risks are sufficiently manageable, and they may, because some of these proponents ask for government support, indirect or directly, and so the same criteria that is used to assess fiscal affordability should be for PPPs should be applied to, for publicly initiated PPPs should be applied to USPs as well. Our last guideline will be that the USPs should involve private sector innovation. In South Africa, the National Treasury USP framework accepts unsolicited proposals for projects featured on the government list of priorities, but makes innovation a core element of the evaluation. In South Wales, USPs pertaining to projects on the government priority list are accepted, but only if the USP demonstrates unique benefits and the USP proponent proposes a unique ability to deliver the project that cannot be matched by other competitors. On the other hand, in the Philippines, USPs for projects already on the government list are excluded, but an exception is made for projects which involve new concept or technology. So innovation is a very key element in accepting these, should be a key element in accepting these USPs. And shall move on to the conclusion.
My name is Kaboyo Priscilla, MBA19 MBA, Kampala, weekend 0047. I'm going to take you through the conclusions. So we conclusively came to this, clearly stipulating that many projects that originate as USPs experience challenges, including diverting public resources away from the strategic plans of the government, providing poor value for money and leading to patronage and lack of transparency, particularly in developing countries, let's say like Uganda. Then to ensure governments can mobilize the strengths of the private sector while protecting the public interest of USPs, when accepted, they should be managed and used with caution as an exception to the public procurement method. Then another thing we looked at is there is need for USPs to be consistent with the country's national infrastructure plans and not appear in the current priority of projects. Lastly, we looked at in both solicited and unsolicited approaches to project development and implementation, the interest of the government is to develop good projects that achieve value for money for the taxpayers. So let's go to the references, which are already in APA. So we look at the Public-Private Partnerships Act 2015. We're going to look at an analysis of global trends and lessons learned, Washington 2011. And then we look at overview of PPP projects in Uganda, Kampala 2020. Then we also go on and look at an analysis of global trends and lessons learned in 2014. Then we also look at the International Journal of Construction Management 2019.